Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our unboxing and first impressions look at the Elephone P8 3D. Like the name suggests, this is a smartphone that has a glasses-free 3D display that is pretty cool for watching movies as well as for playing back games and titles. This is by no means the first 3D smartphone we've seen. It was actually the HTC Evo 3D that came out in 2011. It's since a trend that has been more or less discontinued, but it's interesting that it's made its way back in the form of this Elephone smartphone. This is a company based in Shenzhen, and it retails for about $140 unlocked, which is actually pretty low cost for a mid-tier phablet that runs on Android. So taking a look at the box here, it's pretty simple. We just have some basic information on the sides. This is the red edition of the P8 3D that comes with 4 gigs of built-in RAM, 64 gigs of built-in storage, so pretty good in terms of specs for a $140 phone. It also comes with an octa-core MediaTek MTK 6750T processor along with a 4050 milliamp hour capacity battery, which is pretty impressive, at least on paper. So if we open up the box, again, this phone is not only interesting because of the 3D display, but also because of the red color. Now, red phones or red edition phones are definitely making a comeback. In fact, the past 3 or 4 phones that we've reviewed on this channel all happen to be red in some way or another. So a pretty interesting look. Personally, I do think that it looks rather attractive and sleek, so I do like that particular color scheme. There is a SIM ejector tool in the box along with a quick start guide that's printed in full color, and there's also a free TPU soft case that you get as part of the packaging. The case itself here is pretty simple, although there are these kind of micro dots embedded on the surface, so when the flashlight is activated, it illuminates the entire case, which is a pretty cool effect. In here we also have the charging cable, which I believe will just be using micro USB, and indeed it's using the slightly older micro USB as opposed to USB Type-C, and there's also going to be a wall charger as well. So a pretty simple packaging, not too many surprises along the way. Setting this off to the side and taking a look just at the phone, again at 5.5 inches it's more of a phablet, but it still is reasonably comfortable to hold, again the same size as the iPhone 6 Plus, 7 Plus, and 8 Plus. There is a protective film that is on the front of the phone that we're going to peel off, and let's tap on the power key to see if there's any juice remaining on this device. On the front, we have a 5 megapixel camera for video chatting. There is the earpiece proximity light sensor. The phone does come equipped with a GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, select 4G LTE bands in certain countries, and it has a unique skin on top of Android that's created by Elephone. The phone, though, does not have NFC, nor does it have wireless charging, which is pretty typical for a device of this price. So let's tap on Start. It seems to actually have a very stock installation process. We're just going to set up as new. Now, something I'm noticing immediately is as I'm shifting the screen around, you can see this very interesting kind of effect that's happening that must be due to the unique 3D display, whether it's a film on top of the Gorilla Glass or if it's really something that's different about the display itself. We'll have to dig deeper into, and we'll of course talk about more in the full review, but for now let's just skip ahead. You can see it does have an accelerometer that works fairly well. There are standard capacitive keys down below that takes you home, menu, and back, but they have a slightly different look as well. Now the phone does have rather large bezels on the sides. It's a fairly conventional looking phone, maybe something more in line with 2016 or 2017 on the front, since it doesn't have a 18:9 aspect ratio or 2:1 aspect ratio display, but otherwise it still remains fairly attractive, especially on the back. We're going to try adding a fingerprint now, and this is where the sensor is located on the back, just like on many Xiaomi phones. We also see what looks like a dual camera setup, but I'm assuming that the second one isn't going to be very effective, just like on many of these other low-cost devices. Peeling the protective film back from the surface of the phone. The surface here is made what seems to be of a plastic, although it might have a little bit of aluminum or metal to it since it is slightly cold to the touch. Definitely not as solid in terms of having a unibody build as more premium phones, but overall it still looks and feels pretty good. The top and bottom though are definitely made out of plastic, just like on some Xiaomi devices, for the reception to be better. On the side we have access to controls for the power. There's a volume rocker. On the bottom here there's also a micro USB port for charging, the speaker, 3.5mm headphone jack, which is always nice to see. And this phone, again, does have a SIM card tray located on the edge here. It's a dual SIM phone, and the back cover itself is not replaceable or removable. All right, and now for the fingerprint scanner. It is placed a little bit towards the top of the phone, so you have to reach a little bit to access it. I wish it was closer to the center or on the middle of the device, but overall not bad. I'm going to tap and shift my finger position ever so slightly so that it captures all the edges, and hopefully we have added the fingerprint, and we can also add other fingerprints later on in the settings. So now we're greeted onto Android, and it does seem to actually be a very clean install of the OS, which is very interesting. The display itself, other than being 3D, is a laminated IPS panel, so it's not AMOLED, but it does have very punchy and vibrant colors on first impressions, and seems to be also quite responsive as far as the general navigation is concerned. So I'm impressed that Elephone did decide to go with a more clean, stock-like install as opposed to a heavier skin, which is nice to see. If I go down here, it is running on Android 7.0 Nougat, however, as opposed to 8.0, but again, at this low price, it is forgivable, especially since it's more of a niche phone with that unique 3D display that we have to test in a little bit more detail later on. So very standard as far as the drag down notification shade. Again, the contrast of the display actually seems to be very good. And for size comparison, here is the Meizu Pro 7, which has a 5.3-inch screen as opposed to 5.5 inches. You can see overall dimensions not too far off. Again, another red phone. And we have over here the LeEco Pro 3 AI, which is also a 5.5-inch phone and is very similar overall in terms of dimensions to the Elephone P8 3D. And finally, here is an Alcatel Idol 4S, which we also recently reviewed. Again, the same screen size as well, but has a slightly smaller footprint in terms of bezels on the top and the bottom. So overall, as far as 5.5-inch phones are concerned, the P8 3D really isn't that bad. The fingerprint scanner is fairly responsive. It takes a split second longer than, say, on a Xiaomi phone, but it's also not too bad either. If we take a quick look at the 3D Media, which is that 3D app on here, basically when you first turn it on, it's going to tell you to calibrate it by holding it horizontally to your face, and then you tap on next, and you're able to take a look at the sample shot, where if I kind of change and tilt the phone, you can see the image moving. Now, the effect is probably lost on camera, but in person it actually does produce a shockingly realistic 3D image with great depth. So if I tap on one of the sample featured images through this app, it's also going to give me other 3D images that are actually really realistic. Again, almost impossible to capture on camera, but in person it's a very convincing effect, and definitely one of the better 3D displays I've seen, especially since on phones, the last few that we saw were so many years ago. And if you are in the camera app, you can also use the fingerprint scanner by tapping once to capture an image for selfies, things like that, as you can see here. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on unboxing first impressions of the Elephone P8 is concerned. And for now, I have to say that it seems to be a very promising device. Again, the specs with an octa-core processor along with the 4 gigs of RAM seems to be a respectable phone here in 2018 if you're looking for a budget unlocked device with a slight twist, which is that 3D display. So thanks for watching here, OS Reviews. That's been our unboxing and first impressions look at the Elephone P8 3D, a 3D glasses-free smartphone with a 5.5-inch display.